The Arab is a cancer in our midst. And you don't coexist with a cancer. Cancer you either cut out and throw out, or you die.
Over the past few weeks, a campaign of terror has been escalating in the West Bank. Not just isolated incidents, but daily, organized attacks on Palestinian villages, led by armed far-right settlers. This isn't random violence. It's a rapid campaign of ethnic cleansing, running parallel to the genocide in Gaza. Yet few people understand what's going on, the precise goals, strategy, and ideology behind these forces. Forces now increasingly represented in the highest levels of the Israeli state itself. At the forefront of this campaign, the Hilltop Youth, a radical network of settler youth, some as young as 13. Systematically raiding Palestinian villages, destroying indigenous olive groves, and setting fire to mosques, churches, and homes, often while live streaming it. The world barely registered the horror when, in 2015, they firebombed a Palestinian family home in the West Bank, burning a 1-year-old baby alive. The spiritual leader of the group is the grandson of one certain rabbi from New York, who would go on to become the chief ideologue of Jewish fascism, with followers rising to the highest echelons of the Zionist state, poised to fulfill their ultimate dream. Before we dive in, just a quick word. These videos take a massive amount of time and effort to bring to life. If you find value in what I do and want to help to keep this channel going, please consider supporting on Patreon. Every contribution, big or small, makes a real difference. Thank you for being here. Born Martin David Kahane in Brooklyn in 1932 to an Orthodox Jewish family, he studied political science and later completed a graduate degree in international relations at NYU. His ideas would eventually crystallize in what is now known as Kahanism, crucially shaping various Zionist groups and influential figures. At its core lies a vision of a halachic state in Israel, which will accelerate the coming of the Messiah.
Faith in the God of Israel and a strong Jewish hand, that's the way to bring the Messiah.
What does that mean exactly? We'll explore that later in this video. In the turbulent year of 1968, Kahane founded the infamous Jewish Defense League, JDL, to quote, do the job that the Anti-Defamation League should do, but doesn't. In order to quote, protect Jews from anti-Semitism by whatever means necessary, the JDL started bombing Arab and Soviet properties in the US and killing alleged enemies of the Jewish people, like Christian Palestinian activist Alex Oded in 1985 with a bomb. One other fellow Brooklynite who joined the JDL in New York was a certain Carl Benjamin Goldstein. In Palestine, he will soon commit one of the most brutal massacres in recent memory. The Kahanist trend didn't emerge out of nowhere, but is firmly in line with Zionist political currents that began colonizing Palestine 100 years ago. Meir Kahane's father, who had a great influence on him, was the rabbi of a large synagogue in Brooklyn and a strong supporter of so-called revisionist Zionism, which I already briefly introduced in my videos on the Nakba. But here's a short recap. The dominating Zionist current back then was socialist or labor Zionism, which I did 2 videos about. This is considered the left wing of Zionism, which built all the important institutions that formed the State of Israel. Chief among them was the Haganah, the Zionist militia who quote-unquote defended its expanding settlements, the pseudo-socialist kibbutz. Soon, one particular faction would split because the Haganah's colonizing approach wasn't fascist enough. That new paramilitary group was called Irgun. To understand their worldview, one can look at articles published in a prominent revisionist Zionist newspaper during the 30s. One piece stated that the Nazi movement has both a shell and a kernel. The anti-Semitic shell is to be discarded, but not the anti-Marxist kernel. When Hitler came to power in 1933, the same newspaper praised him alongside shining names like Kemal Atatürk and Benito Mussolini. Another editorial in the same publication declared, "Hitler has still not caused as much evil as Stalin has." The map in the Irgun's emblem includes not only the whole of Palestine, but also Transjordan. Originally part of the British Palestine Mandate, Transjordan was later separated, a move revisionists rejected as they considered it part of the future Jewish state. This desire to revise these territorial boundaries is the origin of the designation. Later, one splinter group thought they can be even more fascist than the Irgun, Lehi, or better known as the Stern Gang, dreaming of building a Jewish state rooted in, quote, nationalist and totalitarian principles and linked to the German Reich by an alliance. But these ambitions weren't limited to the right wing. The undisputed leader of the Zionist movement, for instance, the so-called socialist David Ben-Gurion, also viewed Jordan as part of the Jewish homeland. In fact, he envisioned a Jewish state stretching into Lebanon, Syria, and even the Sinai Peninsula. Even the kibbutz movement, which considered itself more to the left of Ben-Gurion, upheld the idea that Jews had a right to settle throughout these broader regions. Today, the kibbutz movement aligns with the general goals of the right-wing settler militias, but more on this later. During the Nakba, Irgun and Lehi would commit the notorious Deir Yassin massacre. Leftist Israelis will often say that the horrible aspects during the Nakba happened because of right-wing extremist forces. However, it is confirmed that it was the Haganah command itself that gave those orders to the fascist militias. We will see this good cop, bad cop dynamic over and over again. The right wing does the dirty work, while the so-called left wing enables it and does the same dirty work, but with denial and crocodile tears in hindsight. The Irgun's motto was Rak Kach, which translates to only thus or only in this way, expressing the belief that it is only possible to reach the Zionist goals through sheer violence, differentiating themselves from the Haganah's policy of restraint. The Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi later fused together to become the Israeli Defense Forces. And Netanyahu's Likud party is considered the quote-unquote moderate descendant of the revisionist Zionist current, while the more fascist current, if that was even possible, will be represented by a party Kahanist founded in 1971 when he moved to occupied Palestine. The name inspired by the Irgun slogan, Kach. While unsuccessful in elections at first, its political impact would prove far-reaching, shaping the practice of modern Israeli settler colonialism and influencing politicians who now hold the reins of government, pushing to realize their ambition. After arriving in Palestine, Kahanist couldn't resist the urge to plan to kill Palestinians multiple times and landed in prison, where he wrote the book They Must Go, in which he ranted about the illusion and hypocrisy of the Israeli left of his time, who started babbling about inclusivity in times of stability. He wrote that even one of the chief ideologues of labor Zionism, Berl Katznelson, a guy left Zionists point to as one of the good ones, agreed with him on the necessity to deport Palestinians, and quoting him, "The question of the transfer of population has aroused controversy. Is it permitted or forbidden? My conscience in this is perfectly clear. A distant neighbor is better than a close enemy." Kahanist argued similarly that Arab citizens are a fifth column and inherently disloyal to the Jewish state, and thus that Arabs, if they don't leave by choice, quote, shall be asked to make a pledge of their loyalty to the Jewish state and recognize total Jewish sovereignty over it. Those who do so shall remain, with no national sovereignty and no political and voting rights, since they are not members of the Jewish nation. If they don't accept their fate as slaves, they will be expelled by force. He further argued for enforcing halakha, the Jewish law, as codified by Maimonides. Quote, "In a state governed by the Torah, there must be a king, or if not a king, then a president. But the supreme authority must lie with a rabbinic court." This theocratic state would institute religious state schooling, ban sexual relations between Jews and non-Jews, enforce total segregation, and prohibit cultural exchanges between Jewish and Arab students. In an interview, he said, "According to Zionism, this country must be a Jewish state. In a religious state, there can be no such freedom of speech. You can't have Zionism and democracy at the same time. And for those who criticize me, it's very difficult to get out of this contradiction." In this, he was quite correct, because, as he explains, quote, "Democracy means equal rights for all, irrespective of racial or religious origins. Therefore, democracy and Zionism cannot go together, and Israel's Declaration of Independence, which proclaimed the state to be a Jewish state, is a totally schizophrenic document." With this, he points to the contradictory way left and liberal Zionists try to decorate their project with an idealized concept of democracy to appeal to liberal Western public opinion.
I agree that the problem is that Israel can be either democratic or Jewish. It cannot be both. And this is what Kahanist is saying also. But what Kahanist says is that I'll be undemocratic and racist. I'll just throw the Arabs out. For me, this is unthinkable because my Zionist ethos, my Jewish conscience, dictates that Israel must find a way to reconcile the two values.
Yeah, but you've been trying to reconcile the two values here since 1948.
Correct.
And you haven't reconciled them. Things are not getting better, they're getting worse.
Well, I don't want to give it up.
Well, I understand you don't want to give it up.
And in the long run, it will. So, look.
When asked what the borders of Israel should be, he answered, "The borders that are mentioned in the Bible. Let me tell you what the minimal borders are. The southern boundary goes up to Areej, which takes in all of northern Sinai, including Yamit. To the east, the frontier runs along the western part of the east bank of the Jordan River, hence part of what is now Jordan. Eretz Israel also includes part of the Lebanon and certain parts of Syria and part of Iraq, all the way to the Tigris River." These views are not exceptional. In this, he largely agreed with the leftist Zionist founder of the State of Israel, as mentioned before. Just like Ben-Gurion, Kahanist expressed the essence of what this is all about, cutting through all the bullshit. Question: in your dreams, how do you visualize the Middle East? Answer: if the Jewish people do what God wants, if they return to Israel, the Messiah will come. At that time, we'll have peace not only in the Middle East, but all over the world. Then there will be no peace before the advent of the Messiah? No way. We can't have peace any other way. A rabbi once said, "To deceive other people is a terrible thing, but to deceive oneself is a crime." We can't have peace here. The Arabs sincerely believe, and I can understand them, that Haifa belongs to them, and Tel Aviv and Jaffa, not just Judea and Samaria. They sincerely believe, and again, I can understand them, that this country belongs to them. In 1948, 80,000 Arabs lived in Jaffa. There were 70,000 in Haifa, and 50,000 in Ramleh and in Lod. They want to go back home. They don't want to go to Nablus or Jericho. They want to return home. While this fascist obviously believed that Arabs are inherently inferior and anti-Semitic, notice how he explained quite clearly the Palestinians' real motivation for resisting. If you want to look at the naked, honest core of what Zionism is all about, you have to read what its founders or right-wing proponents have written. It's very important right here that you realize that far-right Zionists play a crucial role by acting as the shock troops of the settler colonialist enterprise, pushing the boundaries, creating facts on the ground. Meanwhile, left-wing or liberal Zionism strives to provide a human face to the colonial project on the international stage by pointing fingers at the right in an attempt to isolate the problem, as happened during the Nakba, or today when people say that the genocide is just Netanyahu's fault. In this way, they serve to temper and even co-opt criticism, allowing the underlying colonial structures to persist and normalize. They will, for instance, condemn the fact that right-wing settlers are building so-called illegal outposts in the West Bank, but they will accept it as a reality if 50 years from now, or even 20 years from now, most Palestinians there are displaced and a new map becomes the new normal. How do we know this? Because they already accepted it in so-called Israel, when militias built illegal settlements there and displaced 80% of the Palestinian population. Both left-wing and right-wing Zionism fulfill a crucial function, similar to the roles liberal and conservative parties play within class society more broadly. Check my series on the history of Zionism to better understand these dynamics. I'll link the playlist in the description below. In the meantime, Kahanist's friend from Brooklyn, Carl Benjamin Goldstein, settled in occupied Palestine as well, serving as a physician in the Israeli murder army, where he refused to treat Arabs, even if they were IDF soldiers. There, he changed his name to Baruch and became active in the Kach. In the morning of February 25, 1994, Baruch Goldstein, dressed in an Israeli army uniform, entered the hall of a mosque in Hebron, or Al-Khalil, where approximately 800 Muslim worshippers were performing their morning prayers during the holy month of Ramadan. Then, he opened fire with an assault rifle, killing 29 people, including children, and wounding 125 others. He continued firing until he was overcome and beaten to death by survivors. Following the massacre, a full 23 years after its founding, the Israeli cabinet banned the Kach after over 2 decades of it being plainly obvious what the party was doing and aiming for. Kahane was assassinated in Manhattan in 1990, but his ideology has survived and grown. The most prominent and powerful Kahanist today is current Minister of National Security Itamar Ben-Gvir, who for many years displayed a picture of Baruch Goldstein in his living room. The Jewish supremacist on the rise had been a Kach member from age 16 and referred to Kahane as a holy man, a righteous man. But this isn't just about Nazi-like individuals, it's about a systemic effort to reshape the entire region. Subscribe to the channel to not miss the next part, where we'll shed light on the political parties and the growing settler groups actively working to implement Kahanism during times of genocide from outside and within the state. How far have they infiltrated? Who funds them? And why is far-right Zionism rising at this moment in history? Don't forget to leave a like and comment. I'll see you soon.
Zionism, the very definition of it is the creation of a Jewish state. In fact, Israel is defined in its Declaration of Independence as the Jewish state. I think that only liberals have such contempt for Arabs that they believe that you can buy an Arab's national pride by raising his living standards. Not by bread alone does an Arab live. Because I respect the Arab, I want to throw him out.